thanks. I put it in my inventory. I definitely didn't need toys like that. By this time, night had fallen, as it was wont to do, and now there were only a few lights from lampposts outside the window left. And there were some apartments that clearly gave away the existence of a few survivors. Not everyone had realized yet that you had to be especially careful when hiding at night, since that was when the worst monsters came out to hunt. People. Well, and me. I also wanted to hunt. The beer goes in the bag, and the bag in the inventory, along with my well-earned loot, my emergency set of clothes. I thought about leaving the light on in the room so that potential thieves would waste their time there, but I didn't. There were a bunch of system items here, and I had no desire to share my property with assholes. I used to only go out during this time, when there were practically no people there. It was opposite now. All the yards were full of rotting, wandering deadies, and during the dark time of day they were much more active. I saw that one of the apartments in the 5-story building across from me had a light on. There were shadows moving behind the curtain, which meant someone was definitely alive there. Also, there was a sheet hanging below the window that said they would help anyone who needed it. Oh, help. I had to check, but I thought these were my customers. The apartment was big. I got in through the first window I found and immediately began flying around. The entrance was clean and organized. Everything was nice. It was all quiet, and sounds could only be heard from the farthest room. There was nobody in the kitchen, but the light was on there too. These guys clearly were not hurting for food. All the shelves were full, and there was also a store of long-lasting stuff in the corner. It was as if they had prepared for all of this in advance. Either that or there was someone here who could get out and ransack stores, like a portalist or someone invisible, most likely. I ran into the owner of the apartment in the next room. He was sitting on a couch in front of a television, watching the news. Some channel was still broadcasting, talking about the intricacies of surviving in the new situation. They weren't lying about having to sit around and quietly wait for the government, which was great. Even the stupidest people must know by now that you couldn't just wait it out. You had to kill deadies on your own, get the rewards, and get stronger. Otherwise, you just couldn't survive. And you also had to join up with other people, since it wasn't just merrier with more, but also safer. Except for me, of course. The guy shut the TV off after a short while, grumbling something to himself, and headed into the other room while scratching his balls. I flew after him. Everything looked as peaceful as could be so far. The man had stored up food and was offering help to other people. Amazing. "Hey, bitches, get ready to eat." He went up to a thick door and pounded on it loudly. Or maybe not so awesome. I passed into the locked room, hanging right under the ceiling. 1, 2, 3, 5 girls. All pretty, like they had been specially chosen. Some of them had been sleeping, but after the loud knocking on the door, they all jumped up and started bustling around. None of them had any clothes. They were all completely naked, and many of them showed clear traces of recent beatings. "Hurry up!" yelled the man, opening the door. 3 of them ran into the kitchen, busying themselves, but the other 2 stayed in the room, cowering in the corner. "While I'm waiting," the man smiled lecherously and started pulling off his greasy, sweat-stained clothes. Pants. Crap. Not system ones. I was so happy for such disappointment. I wasn't even going to look at the underwear. I had my own. There was a massive bed in the middle of the room. The man lay down on it and angrily glared at his slaves. They shivered in fear for some time, but they did get up and head over to him. I wasn't completely uninterested in watching a porno with actors like this, so I headed over to see what there was in the other rooms. This guy was going to get his due somehow, but it made sense to see exactly who I was dealing with. The other rooms were also full of everything you needed to survive. There were stores of food and water, and a whole separate pile of system items. Not that there were that many. I had left more behind in my last place. All right, dude, it's time to say goodbye. Whack! The blade of the halberd slid easily into his chest. Before that, I had to grab one of the girls by the hair and throw her to the side so she wouldn't get in the way. Ah! They all shouted as one. Okay, let them shout as much as they want. The man stared at me in disbelief and started to disappear. But I wasn't about to wait for him to vanish, so I hit him a few more times, just to be sure. Inventory increased plus 90 pounds. Is that how many he managed to kill, really? An immediate jump over 200 for me. He was luring people here, killing the men and ugly girls right away, and leaving the pretty ones to use for himself. Not bad, sure, but why go through all the trouble? For inventory space? Most likely. I was also only working up a sweat for that now, when I could easily raise my level and get rewards. I think I will get to about 400 and stay there. After that, I will kill only strong monsters and find cool items for myself. And also wait for opportunities to participate in more tests. Even though the unique spheres more often than not just gave me useless trash, I would still keep believing, hoping, and waiting. Sooner or later, there would be something for a ghost. "Who are you?" came a frightened voice from under the bed. A prick in a trench coat. I looked at my outfit and realized that it wasn't really a joke. After saying that, I vanished into thin air, since I didn't want to talk to anyone. But I stayed to watch them. Just a moment ago, a monster was removed from the world. The planet was cleaner, and in doing so, I had saved the lives of some innocent people. I really felt like a hero. But was it a good thing for these girls? Before I showed up, they had been protected with food and drink. I mean, they weren't clothed, but that was a different story. It took the slave girls a while to come to their senses, all while trying to figure out what had just happened. But within 5 minutes, one of them ran into the kitchen, letting the others know that they were now free. I kept watching. There would always be more assholes, and I could find as many of them as I wanted. But watching how these naked girls would find a way out of their situation would be very interesting. They started by getting rid of the body. It was strange how quickly they took care of the 200-pound corpse. They grabbed his bloody body without any squeamishness and threw it out the window. You could clearly see the hatred on their faces. It was obvious that they had all been his unwilling victims. That stopped the moment they all started getting dressed. A leader had appeared among the girls, and she had started giving instructions to the group as to who should do what now. She herself set about the task of making sure the rest didn't break down. Since they realized that their slavery was over, they had started sniffling and crying, which got them some instructional slaps. Amazing. Now I felt like I had done a good deed, and my inventory had increased, which you couldn't help but be happy about. I flew outside, up a couple feet above the roofs, and started looking around for a new victim. There was no police and no laws. Everything that held back the monsters before was gone. So my search didn't last long. It was only 10 minutes before I heard a desperate scream. The zombies down below got excited, but they couldn't find the source of the cry. That was because it was a woman, standing on a roof, who was yelling. I hardly cared, since her enemy didn't seem to be a person. The woman, clutching a child of about 6, was shrieking and trying to climb down. She was being followed by a massive bird. Judging from the color of its wings, it had once been a pigeon, but it was hard to even call that beast a bird now. It was about 5 feet long. It had powerful talons, wings studded with spikes, and a slightly hooked beak with some greenish liquid dripping from it, which had to be either poison or acid. The beast wasn't using any abilities. It was just gently gliding forward, preparing to swallow its prey. But what were people to this pigeon? It was clear that their levels hadn't gone too far up. If it was for meat, then they could just go down below. The carrion there hadn't even started rotting yet. Even though some of them had started to smell a little, But they probably hadn't smelled like roses when they were alive anyway. But I couldn't complain. This was the first real monster that I had encountered since the beginning of the apocalypse. I really wondered what I could get from it. Or maybe even inventory space. I mean, who knew? Kuru! The bird turned its head to the side, staring down its target, and continued gliding forward, bobbing its head. It was just as stupid as it had been before. You could tell by looking at it. Now it was going to peck people like they were seeds, to no end. How did it evolve like that? It was strange, like someone had directed it to become stronger. And how could a crappy pigeon kill a zombie anyway? Or who did it kill to get a level? And it was a goddamn pigeon. I hadn't even encountered a cat or a dog yet. What would be around zoos? Or in Africa? There must be a whole shitload of them there now. But those were problems for future me. Ah! The woman had not stopped screaming. The child was not that scared, but his knees were shaking and he hadn't taken his eyes off of the mutated bird. It would be better if you turned around. I materialized right behind the pigeon, took a wide swing, and sliced it right down its back. Thwink! Well, god damn it. Oh, that was disappointing. I had calculated that I should be able to cut him right in half, or at least break his spine. But my powerful weapon had only weakly slid across his wings, bringing up sparks. But if at first you don't succeed, try again. I faded into thin air and flew around the bird. It turned around to see its attacker, but, finding no one, kept moving forward. All right, another chance. Thwink! Ah, not like that. It was a good hit. Screw it. Next time I'll stab him right. There was definitely a good place for that on the back side. Chapter 11. I turned my halberd around, then paused for a minute. Did I really want to do this? How would I be able to hold on to this handle later, knowing where it had been? The pigeon continued onwards as though nothing had happened, and I made my choice. In just a little bit, it would start feasting on its fresh, screaming meat. Or it would fly away, and I would be left with nothing. I materialized, squatted down, and jammed the blunt end as hard as I could into the bird's weak point. Crow! The pigeon began squealing all over, but I had already vanished into thin air by then. He spun around frantically, spraying his poisonous spit all over, while also leaking a fountain of blood around the roof, but couldn't find his attacker at all. And he was also a few feet up in the air. His wings protected him from blades. I might have been able to stab him and done some damage, but it wouldn't be a finishing blow. I had gotten him right up the ass, but the results exceeded all my expectations. The incensed bird had right away begun dashing around the roof, completely forgetting his prey, and slowly began losing his strength. Pigeon, level 10, health 79%. Level 10. Apparently he had started by pecking apart his whole flock, and then switched to something bigger. I could see no other way that he could have become such a monster. Even if I had jammed the halberd as far up as it could go, it still wouldn't have done him in right away. Health 81%. And he was regenerating fast. Okay, its wings protected it from stabbing and cutting weapons, but a crushing blow could work almost completely well. I waited for the beast to calm down, then dug through my inventory to get my brass knuckles out. It had regained just 5 points of mana, which was a rate that I was completely dissatisfied with. 1 point per hour? How long would I have to wait for my halberd then? So I did check how things were with the mana in my main weapon. It turned out to be much better, with a little more than 20. It seemed like the more total mana there was in a weapon, the faster it regenerated, or that it was the same rate by percentages. Maybe it was dependent on the quality of the item, or on something else, but it was too early to go into those kinds of details right now. Anyway, it was definitely not the time to think about that when I had a massive, stupid head with a sharp, poisonous beak right in front of me. I materialized in the middle of my swing and immediately hit him. The brass knuckles flashed on my hand, lighting up the roof in a second, and with a loud smack, landed right in the beast's eye. He didn't even manage to squeak, immediately flying up a few feet and freezing. Health 46%. I didn't know how long he would be dazed, so I got my halberd out right away. I took aim and started stabbing the beast in his neck and head. I didn't get up close, though, since I didn't want to get hit by any poison. At most, I would spend another 10 durability points to break that stupid skull. But that's not what happened. First, blood started flowing from under his wings, and then the blade cracked through the natural armor of the beast. His whole body tensed up, and then, after a few seconds, the beast breathed his last. I didn't get a level for it, but a blue potato did drop. It didn't stay there for long, because I immediately put it into my inventory and headed onward to check my surroundings. The woman was still screaming, but I didn't pay her any mind. She was in one piece and would get off her ass to look around the rooms. There was a ton of food there. It would last a while. I was in conservation mode, moving about a mile per hour, I would guess. It was a little slower than a nice stroll. I had found my destination almost immediately, but flying there would take at least 15 minutes, so I devoted my free time to looking out over the view of the new city. I watched what was happening below carefully, and noticed a few animals while I was flying. It was weird that they weren't turning into zombies. A small pack of dogs was attacking a couple of deadies who had wandered into a playground. The dogs were well organized, attacking all together from all sides and avoiding attacks. But even so, one of the deadies managed to bite a weak little dog, ripping out a tuft of fur and reaching the flesh. The dog started to whimper, but the other members of the pack quickly dealt with the zombie, freeing the runt from his iron grip. 5 minutes, then 10. But the animal didn't ever turn into a mindless murder machine, just the opposite. One of the dogs came up to it and started licking the wound, which healed up right before my eyes. Apparently, some dogs had managed to evolve by getting abilities and mutations. Some of them blended into the surroundings. One of them had grown bone armor, and another one had claws on its paws that came with metal, shining in the moonlight. The pack was completely fit for its surroundings. They had taken over a plot of land enclosed by a fence with holes in it. Now, as its owners, they fiercely defended it, tearing apart any uninvited guests. I would be a son of a bitch if I didn't check that. Doggo! I had appeared about 50 feet away from one of the dogs. I had nothing to offer him, so I just decided to say hello and see how man's best friend would react to me. Grrr. I had no intention of starting a conflict, so as soon as the whole pack had me surrounded, I dematerialized out of harm's way. But even when I was in my incorporeal state, some of the dogs continued looking at me like before. They might not be showing aggression anymore, but I got the impression that those animals could still feel me somehow. I tried again, this time flying outside of their territory. The dogs gathered by the fence but didn't start attacking. The just bared their teeth in warning that outsiders weren't allowed. Got it. No problem. I wouldn't come in. I had no business with them at all, but still, it was interesting to see what effect the system had on the animal world. That pigeon had leveled up very quickly. The pack of dogs, as far as I could tell, wasn't especially strong, but that was because they had decided to play defense. The stupid bird, on the other hand, had simply destroyed everything that crossed its path. I felt like cats also had a high possibility of reaching the top of this new food chain. I mean, they killed for fun before, and now that had become something useful, too. I spent a half hour satisfying my curiosity, but it was worth it. Information about the rules of this new world, even if it seemed useless, was definitely not unwelcome. The apartment I was flying to was located on the second floor of a 5-story building. Kind of old-fashioned. I was attracted to it because of the curtain with an offer of help to anyone who needed it. My faith in humanity had never existed, so there was no risk of losing it. And there wasn't any risk now, either. I was actually a little disappointed when I realized that the inhabitant of this apartment was actually ready to help people and not asking for anything in return. After flying through the window, I ended up in a little kitchen. A little old man, about 80 years old, stood hunched over by the stove, boiling buckwheat in a large pot, periodically adding meat from cans that had recently been opened. No, he definitely wasn't eating alone. So I kept looking around the little apartment. Plus, I could hear people's voices coming from the next room. I was right. There were 5 people in the living room. Most of them looked confused, interested in each other and how they managed to get to this safe house. I was running into the entrance with a zombie right behind me. It caught me on the stairs and grabbed my sweater.
It nearly bit me. Then the old man knocked him off the stairs with his cane. Then he took me in and fed me, said a fat 40-year-old woman, finishing her story. Near the end of it, she had started crying, and the girl sitting next to her tried to calm her down, patting her on the head. Too bad I missed the beginning of her story, but no matter. People were afraid, and the old man helped them, since he had long ago lost the ability to fear as he aged. All well and good, and I could keep on flying since there was nothing for me here. Unless 2 guys about 20 years old were sitting apart from the rest, looking at them frowningly, even with suspicion. I didn't think that the old man would let them get away with anything, but it couldn't hurt to listen to their conversations anyway. "Who gives a shit what kind of abilities he has?" whispered one of them, the one that looked older. "Each of us has a knife. We stab him a couple times and boom, all the food is ours." "Man, hell if I know. Do we really need that food? Just go in those other apartments. There'll be something there," the second one said evasively. "Jesus, what is wrong with you, honestly?" The older one even raised his voice a little, but got himself under control in time. "There is a strategic stockpile here. It would be enough for a whole 6 months. What about these guys, then?" The boy nodded towards the other survivors, but his older friend just grinned. "Get rid of them, too. Just leave the girl. We'll take turns using..." Inventory increased +10. I had gotten tired of listening to his Machiavellian plans. At least one of them deserved to die, so there was no reason to hold back. Sure, he hadn't killed anyone, but he definitely wanted to. And once there is a desire, then opportunity will come with time. You couldn't swing a long halberd in the little room, and it would be a shame to waste its durability on this asshole, so I just sank my axe into his head. So I wouldn't have to worry about pulling out the weapon, which was stuck fast. I dematerialized, and within a second I appeared next to the second one, but him I socked with the brass knuckles. A good, solid hit. I clearly felt the bones in his face break, and some of his teeth flew onto floor along with some blood. The women screamed, and soon the old man rushed into the room. He easily lifted the beaten and unconscious body in his arms and closed his eyes. A barely noticeable gold wave passed across his scrunched-up face, which started changing before my eyes. Within just a few seconds, his bones were back in place and growing together, and soon there were no traces of his injuries left. "Who did this?" shouted the old man angrily, pointing at the corpse lying in the corner. But everyone could only shake their heads, since no one had seen it. "Who, goddammit?" That was me. Calm down. I had wanted to run right away, but at the last moment I decided to stay. Otherwise the old man would think one of his had done it, no matter how unlikely that was. "But—" I didn't give him a chance to open his mouth. He wanted to kill first you, and then everyone else. "Besides you," I said, pointing at the girl, then blinked and turned my skill on again.
I didn't succeed in punishing the second one. The old man turned out to be a powerful healer, and that guy probably never even felt the pain. But it would be embarrassing, although even that wasn't certain. And be more careful about this, I whispered into the old man's ear, having materialized right behind him. Okay, bye. Don't take in just anyone. There wasn't much for me there, but that didn't mean that there were no more assholes to increase my inventory with in the city. Until sunrise, I wandered through apartments, flying around attics looking for any douchebags. There was no need to attack them right away. The first priority was to make sure that the person would be of no use to society in the future. From some people I got 15 pounds each, but those were just beginner shitheads. Most of them treated me with 20. They were the ones who had managed to kill 2 people since the beginning of the apocalypse. The fattest loot, both literally and metaphorically, was the leader of a whole band of assholes. He gave me a whole 90 pounds of inventory and a small mountain of gray rewards. Yeah, it was all trash, but luckily for me, it was unopened. They had taken up residence in the sewers, an extremely comfortable place, it seemed. A large number of entrances and exits, and it was very hard for the deadies to get in. And it was easy to take people by surprise. Lure them with food and shelter, and they would just come right in. The bandits killed only those people who tried to speak against them or leave their underground camp. The fat bastard had decided to rule with an iron fist right away, and brutally punished any disobedience. So by the time I showed up, there weren't any dissenters left at all. At first I thought it was just a normal survivors' camp. Yeah, there were a couple dozen women, some downtrodden men and children, and about 10 armed fighters, not just with system weapons, but also with firearms. And right when I had decided to fly away, I heard whispering. One girl was suggesting to another one that they should try to run away or kill the fat guy. But the other one just shushed her and said it wouldn't work. If they ran away, they would be chased down and killed. And if they tried to kill him, then their deaths would be much more painful. And a lot of people had already tried, but nobody managed to do it. Everything came down to the uncommon class that the fatty had been able to snatch up. He was a vampire, or something like that. By killing people and drinking their blood, the vampire got stronger and more durable, stealing their stats. Not a great look, but people had already accepted their lot, trying not to stand out and hoping they would kill someone else. He really was pretty tough. At first, I didn't even appear among the people, just used the ability of my weapon. The cleave wave only cut the skin on his back, which started healing up with seconds. An alarm was raised, and the fighters ran off to find me. Once they had gotten far enough away, I repeated my trick, but this time I also materialized and sliced the blade of my halberd into the freak's spine. But even that didn't kill him. So I turned back into a ghost, flew around the screaming mass, readied my punch, and drove my brass knuckles into the bridge of his nose a few times, activating the power hit on the last one. The fatty fell on his back, and before the bones in his face could knit back together, I smashed him as hard as I could with my halberd. After that, I dealt with the remaining henchmen. That just took a simple hit to the back of the head. My weapon, given how big it was, easily cracked the skulls of people with a standard set of stats. Once again. Yeah, I finished off the assholes. But would the people living here survive now? They were happy that the nightmare was over, but I wouldn't be the one to disappoint them by telling them the hard parts were ahead of them. They would have to take everything on themselves and do something on their own. A lot of them simply didn't have it in them and would have to be pushed constantly, forced to do some kind of work. But that was not my problem. I set out to take care of that asshole for my own good. Sure, I wouldn't mess with people who seemed okay, but that was it. Babysitting each and every person, even if I had wanted to, was simply not possible. Inventory 430 pounds. Yeah, that was pretty much more than enough. Just a little more, and there would be no reason to keep hunting people on purpose. It would be better to focus on the monsters.
Those beasts might have leveled up a fair bit in the meantime, so I could get some good rewards from them. Or zombies. There was no point in killing the regular ones, so I could and should find mutated ones. But now my first order of business was opening some of my rewards, and using my blue potato. I should have felt hungry a while ago, and I couldn't go wrong with a stat bonus. I got out of the sewers right by where I got my first level. After thinking a bit, I flew toward the police station. Since I was nearby, I might as well drop in and see how the people were getting along. The building greeted me warmly, with tightly blocked entrances and windows, as well as a small contingent of system fighters. They were going out for a morning hunt. I had already seen a lot of them, some who were specialized in attacking with their skills, and some armed with system weapons. With their swords, spears, and bows, they skillfully and silently mowed down the deadies that piled up against the fence overnight. However, there was no way they would be able to get to a grocery store. So instead, they satisfied themselves with gray potatoes, not trying to reach any sort of luxury. Well, amazing. I watched them for a while, impressed with how they killed zombies, then continued onward. I flew around the whole building, making sure that basically nobody else had come since my last visit, then materialized in one of the empty rooms. Nobody would bother me here, and after eating lunch I could talk to that big guy again. I had nothing to feed those assholes with, but it was time for them to share their stuff with me, and I had something to pay for it with. Last time I realized that these people could be useful to me in the future, and now I was convinced of it again. They were developing, thinking about how to improve their lives. And their leader was a good guy, tough but fair. Over time, they would develop and become a real society. Then they would start producing weapons and goods, and they would finally make me some pants. As soon as I got my body back from the system, I had two problems. The first was that I desperately wanted to eat, and the second was to sleep. And no matter how much my stomach grumbled, my fatigue was stronger than my hunger. So I got out a mountain of gray potatoes, opening them one after another in the hope of finding a potion. I had almost 190 regular food sets. I got a lot of them in the mall, but I also came across a fair amount while moving around. I had to waste 30 of them before I found a set with 2 different colored vials. I set the food carefully on the floor in the corner of the room, and then, sitting at a table, uncorked the vials and drained them both to the bottom. My mood improved, my strength returned, and I felt the will to live. The world around me filled with color. After getting completely restored, I took a blue potato out of my inventory and opened it immediately. I was expecting to see a full-course meal on my table, but I got something completely different. A syringe? A flask? I started turning the strange item around in my hands, only remembering to check the system information after a few seconds. This is interesting. Chapter 12. Vaccine. Rare. Description. Single-use item. Upon use, it grants a powerful immunity of up to 1 month to the zombie virus. It was just a glass syringe with a cloudy blue liquid. The short but thick needle hinted that it had to be used in the butt muscle, and then you wouldn't have to be afraid of bites for at least a month. Although if they did eat you, it wouldn't be very fun. Embarrassing, even. I got out another potato. I would use the syringe after I ate, since maybe if I just used it on an empty stomach, it might not work as well. It did say up to 1 month, after all. That meant it might be less. For breakfast today, the system decided to treat me to a piping hot steak that tasted just unbelievable. There was also a bottle of red wine with no label, a wine glass for it, and other tableware, along with some kind of fruit pie for dessert. The smell of the roasted moat filled the room immediately, and, almost drooling, I set about eating. I could hear my teeth grinding since I was chewing so hard. I deliberated about the wine for a bit, whether or not I should have it so early in the morning, but I soon gave in and filled the glass. "Who the hell is in there?" Where is that smell coming from, damn it? On the other side of the door, I heard footsteps and then voices. People had smelled the odor, which had wafted around the whole building, as far as I could tell, and were trying hard to find it now. I would be looking for it too if I had to live on gray sets, so I got it. But isn't that why I came here? I would have to talk to them sooner or later, whether I wanted to or not. It's over this way! Get out of the way! I heard a familiar voice right outside the door. Step off, idiots! Just in case, I popped the last piece of meat in my mouth, downed the glass, and dematerialized. Then the shooting started right off. Yes, right here, growled the big guy, breaking into the room. What kind of prick was stuffing his face here? Come out, douchebag. You can't hide forever. He started searching the room from top to bottom. Apparently, he thought someone had decided to squirrel away some delicious food. But his search didn't lead him to anything, which made him even more angry, and he started shouting at thin air. His followers quickly stepped away. Obviously, it was better not to make this guy angry. But I quickly understood why they all ran away. Right in front of me, the man started growing over with brown fur. His face began stretching out, gradually becoming an animal's muzzle. But most importantly, his body grew in size. His clothes didn't tear, but just dissolved, as if they were being absorbed into the fur. God damn. Within a minute, there stood a huge, shaggy bear in front of me in the place of the guy. He began sniffing at the air in search of the offender, but, excuse me, of course, but I haven't finished my pie. I appeared next to the table and grabbed the dessert, tossing it right into my mouth. Pausing for a second, I took the unfinished bottle of wine, too, and hid it in my inventory. If you didn't finish it, then you might not get the stat bonus. You had to drink it all the way down. Rah! The bear roared, and I turned my class skill back on. But to hell with fighting in such small quarters. Plus, there was no point in fighting. I was just planning on having a conversation. It wasn't for nothing that I had studied those animals earlier. This shapeshifter wasn't too different from them, and like the dogs, he could sense where I was. I flew around the bear for a while, and he followed my movements the whole time, never showing his back. As he was turning, the majority of the furniture in the room was turned into splinters, seeing as his fat ass could hardly even fit into the tiny room. Don't step on the food, I said, appearing again, understanding that the bear wasn't going to attack me. There, it's in the corner. You can give to your people. I don't need it. After I said that, he started transforming back. The reverse process lasted a little longer, and it definitely wasn't pleasant for him. Within 5 minutes, there was a man, weakened from the change, lying in front of me. His forehead was covered in sweat, and his breathing was labored and heavy. Here, drink this. I felt bad for him and handed him a vial with red liquid in it. He didn't say no, taking it, tearing the cork out with his teeth, and downing the whole thing in one swig. I took out my wine and put it to my lips. I wasn't about to share it, but to stop him from asking, I got out a cold can of beer, too. Thank you, he growled, taking a couple of deep gulps. Always parched after that bullshit, fuck. I nodded, barely understanding, and we sat in silence, enjoying our alcohol for a few minutes. He was coming to his senses after his transformation, and I was digesting my food. It was settling well and doing its job, so the only thing I had to do was enjoy this moment of satisfaction. What did you come to visit us for? The big guy said, breaking the silence. I'm not letting you use our women, I'll tell you that. Well, just... What? I didn't get what I heard right away. What the hell do I need your women for? There was a guy here, he said, grinning. Invisible. I found him by his scent and tore him a new one, but that prick managed to get away. And how did you see me? I wanted to know for myself. Certainly not by my scent. Who the hell knows? I just felt it, he said,
brushing aside the question. We sat in silence for a while. My bottle of wine was reaching its end, and the big guy had already finished his 4th can of beer when I remembered why I came here. I came here for a reason, I said, slapping my forehead. Do you have someone to kill? I took care of a bunch of people last night, and I just need one more to reach my goal. You're a real motherfucker, he said, shaking his head. But as a police officer, I can't let you do that. Are they in the cells? Not them, but him. In the basement, across from the stairs to the left. But I won't allow it. Yeah, I got it. I smiled, disappearing into thin air, leaving behind another 2 cans of cold beer, 5 gray potatoes, and a green one. The big guy shook his head, but quickly put all of that into his inventory. Igor! He yelled, and after a minute I heard footsteps hurrying along. Yes, big brother, shouted the guy running into the room, out of breath. He was the exact opposite of the bald guy, skinny and short. As far as I could remember, that was the guy who was casting spells with the air last time. Go and get the dead body out of cell. I stopped listening. I had to hurry, otherwise Igor would come for the body, and he would still be alive. That wouldn't look good. Taking the form of a ghost, I stopped for a minute. Why was I just sitting and chatting with that big guy? Geez, it was like we had gone fishing together. Oh, wine. Yeah, that was it. Drinking a whole bottle on your own could work wonders. I would become nice and social. I needed to be more careful with that. Thankfully, the alcohol stopped working on my mind when I turned into a ghost. There was indeed one person sitting in the cell. The man's body was not undamaged anyway, completely covered in bruises and cuts. I had no idea what he did to deserve that, but I trusted the big guy in this, so I could happily finish off this prisoner without any twinges of conscience afterward. Inventory increased +10. Now I understand what he did. No problem. I didn't have to worry about it. Now my inventory could take 450 pounds, but I wasn't going to fill it up yet. The ability to put the body of a zombie in there was very valuable. I wouldn't have to materialize to dig through a mountain of corpses anymore. I would simply throw them away and easily take all my rewards. And I could throw bricks from high up. It would be an effective way to fight zombies. But then I would get any rewards, just experience. So we would have to do it the old-fashioned way. Before I set about finding a strong opponent, I spent some time watching how life in the police station was going. It had been 2 days? I wasn't even sure. The total lack of sleep had affected me, with the days all running together, and I couldn't even begin to think how much time had passed since this all started. But whatever, who cares? The important thing was that people were starting to adapt to the changing circumstance. Now the soldiers were coming back from their hunt. They were met by some women who helped them take off their armor and immediately went off to clean it. The table had also been set for them in advance. Nothing fancy, but still. They had heated up cold food from the gray potatoes and put them in their inventory so it wouldn't cool down, only taking it out when the soldiers were on the doorstep. Basically, everyone was busy. The defenders were taken care of, and they in their turn risked their lives to get some food, to get stronger, and to protect those close to them. How sweet. It was good that I got the class I did. Ugh. If I had picked something else, then I would have constantly had to be as close to people as possible. But somehow I felt like I would have to, and that, damn it, there would be no way to avoid it. Plus, the system might hit me with something awful and force me to stick to somebody in the end. I thought the time had come to check up on the guy with the bow. Plus, it was on my way. I decided to just head the way I was facing. Any social place would work, since where a lot of people could come together would have strong monsters anyway. And that was all I needed now. There was not a point in more planning than that, since I would have to act as circumstances dictated anyway. It would be great if I could connect to the internet and see how things were going in the world, and to read forums about the system, and skills, and everything else. I mean, there had to be unique spheres and skills somewhere, right? Or I could find out a way to do tests more often. Cole! Cole! I heard a squeak from down below. Right then I flew down to about the 4th story and was about to fly into the attic. but the squeak seemed familiar to me. Oh, what? Had he decided not to give me his rewards? Or maybe he was more afraid of me than the deadies. The girl was sticking her head out of a second-story window, and below her, her brother was trying to get away from a whole horde of deadies. I could see bite marks on his body, but he still wasn't giving up, shooting arrow after arrow at them. From what I could gather, he had gone outside at first light to get rewards and arrows. Without that, he couldn't pay back the loan of the weapon, and they also had to eat something. I didn't think that the soldiers on the other side of the house could provide the 100 people in the attic with enough food fast enough. They were just too careful. The boy, on the other hand, was acting extremely recklessly. The deadies had trapped him in a corner and were getting closer and closer every second, gnashing their teeth, ready to tear the boy to pieces. In response, he was shooting arrow after arrow, not wanting to give up. But it was hopeless, since there was at least one big guy against him. Even if you made a pincushion out of him, the only thing that would help was a precise shot to the eye. Otherwise, you would never drop a powerhouse like that. All right, he was in trouble. Nikolai had been shooting deadies all night, having just taken up one of the rooms on the second floor. He used to live here, so he had the keys. He took his little sister with him, since leaving her in that camp was even more dangerous. You never knew what weird stuff those two assholes could get up to. They should have been kicked out a long time ago, but all the guys were busy around the clock trying to get rewards. Very, very slowly. Even the boy thought the adults were being too careful. Some old-timer in the apartment had come up with that method, and everyone else agreed to it. And nobody was going to listen to a teenage boy. When the sun rose over the horizon, he had to stop hunting, simply because he had run out of arrows. Under the window, there were about 20 finished deadies, but at least 5 of them were there from the last hunt. That time, everything had gone smoothly, and the boy made off with a pretty good haul, 3 potatoes and 2 gray spheres. In one of those, he had found a quiver of arrows, and the other one had a useless knife. Then they ate a little. They weren't about to head back to the people in the attic. They just pulled some trash up against the door in case the zombies got in and content themselves with that. But now, all that debris needed to be cleared. Nikolai went down to the first floor, popped into a room, made sure that everything was safe all around, and jumped out a window to the outside. The first he did was collect the unbroken arrows. He took them all with care, since he had no idea when he would get another set of them. To do that, he made a precise, even cut with a knife. But not the one he had gotten in his starting kit, but a regular, non-system one. But he couldn't get any rewards. Before that, he heard noise from the bushes. The boy pulled his drawstring taut and aimed his weapon toward the sound. Since it sounded like there was only one zombie there, he didn't start heading back to the room right away. But as soon as the deadie appeared, Nikolai froze. A woman appeared from the bush. Her face, hands, and legs were all bitten up, and her clothes were covered in brown spots of dried blood. Mom? The boy barely managed to say it. His eyes welled up with tears, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make himself shoot. He suddenly recalled the recent events when everybody had an intense headache, and then people started rooming out of their rooms, first to the entrance, and then outside. His mother abandoned her children and ran outside with everyone else, as though she had gone crazy. Cole and his sister had tried to do the same, but the stream of people wouldn't even let him open the door, and after a few tries, he passed out. And then came the words and numbers in front of his face, and stats like in a video game. And the person he loved most turned into the walking dead. Cool! His sister's shout brought him right back to his senses, reminding him that she had nobody besides him now. But it was too late. The zombie had managed to bite onto his outstretched arm, and the boy could never nothing else besides run away. Tears came to his eyes as he realized that he had let his sister down. A bite was a death sentence. But he had to do something. He had to get the rewards and leave something behind, at least. But that didn't work out either. His sister's shout had attracted a whole horde of zombies. There was a mutant among them, too, which Nikolai, no matter how much he tried, had no chance against. So he just ran away until he turned the corner and hit a fence. That was where he decided to make his last stand against the monsters. Wiping away his tears, he stuck all his remaining arrows in the ground in front of him, then pulled the bowstring. 1.
The zombie that had just appeared from around the corner fell right on his back, having taken an arrow straight to the face. But he was replaced by 2 more. The boy's hands were shaking from the exertion, but, gritting his teeth, he continued to shoot arrow after arrow. To hell with exhaustion, to hell with the fact that he could never win like this. But he had to do something anyway. The more deadies he could kill, the fewer would be left in the world that his sister would have to live in.
"Take that, you dicks!"
he shouted, shooting his second-to-last arrow.
"Had enough?"
he screamed, completely forgetting that that would attract more of their attention. He wasn't worried about that anymore. The last arrow shot forward, turning into dust against the impenetrable armor of the big guy. But the boy just grinned, throwing away his bow, and grabbed his knife. The deadies just kept on coming. The closest ones had almost reached him, so the boy, making his peace with death, rushed forward to meet them. At the last moment, he closed his eyes and... an explosion! And a dozen zombies were knocked to the ground at once. After a few seconds, the big one recovered, taking a determined step towards his prey. But after a sudden crunch, the beast fell forward with a groan.
"Yeah, a green one."
A guy appeared right out of thin air. He was holding a halberd in his hands, but he was also looking at the floor, casually tossing out a green reward. That's skill. Nikolai could only dream about something like that. But the man was looking at the book with nothing but disgust, as if it offended him. Screw it, it's good enough. He was strange-looking, so the boy recognized him immediately. His dirty brown coat, tied-on belt, high boots, and odd-looking hat. Nikolai also remembered the debt that he had to repay for the loan of the bow. "Dude, take the rewards for sure. I'm on my way out," he said, sniffling.
He was starting to run out of strength, and his bite was really starting to fester.
"But thank you for taking care of my mom. I couldn't do it." The man looked first at the big guy, then at the boy. Then he frowned, nodded to himself, and disappeared into thin air. Maybe I can still bring my sister some potatoes? But I could turn at any moment, and she wouldn't be able to stop me, the boy thought. But I could just throw them all through the window. Nikolai got to his feet, just about to start gathering the rewards, but then stopped in his tracks. A syringe was lying right at his feet. It drew the boy's attention with its strange look, so Nikolai bent down and took it in hand.
"What?"
Tears were rolling down his cheeks again.
"Thank you!"
he shouted, addressing the air somewhere.
"Thank you,"
he whispered this time, clutching the gift in his hands.
Chapter 13.
"Oh, just shut up. Get back in the house, dumbass." I was tired of watching, but I couldn't just fly away. I had to make sure that he successfully picked up all the rewards and got back to the room. All right, whatever. Just the ones he got himself. I wasn't going to share the rest, or else he would get weak. He used the vaccine right away. Yeah, he could have opened a potato and found some healing potions, but I decided to just give him an advantage for a month. If I got bitten all of a sudden, no big deal. Permanent immunity would be fine, but like that, watching the clock and waiting for the effect of the vaccine to end, it was useless. Either, at best, nobody would bite me, or, at worst, well, I had more than enough potions. I watched how they were doing. Not too bad. They had water, and now also a good amount of food. And they should have enough equipment too, given he had gotten a large number of spheres, and at least one of them should definitely have some arrows. Then I looked through the camp, seeing how people were getting by there. Not really well, it seemed. There was no oversight, no management at all, and people were just busy sitting around, waiting for something to happen. A few were going through the rooms, scavenging the food reserves, but the majority were just staying in the shitty attic. They could get their stuff together or, I don't know, kill some deadies. Or at the very least hunt pigeons, since those animals were not as harmless as I used to think. Basically a big disappointment, especially compared with the people in the police station. Everybody was busy there, even if a lot of them were doing pointless nonsense, but at least no one was doing nothing, which made for a lot less stress. Here, even the atmosphere was oppressive, and every day it would get worse and worse if nothing changed. Unless a strong leader showed up who could make people work. Okay, I have spent too much time around people.
Even the wine had stopped working now. Before heading out on my next hunt, I checked my interface. Name, Casp. Level, 10. Class, Ghost. Stats, Body, 14. Strength, 5. Dexterity, 6. Constitution, 3. Mind, 19. Intelligence, 6. Reaction, 8. Perception, 5. Spirit, 10. Repository, 8. Conduits, 2. Available stat points, 0. Skills, active, passive, additional, dematerialization, class skill. Available skill points, 20. Abilities, min inventory, 460 pounds. Basically everything was the same except one thing. After the steak, pie, and bottle of wine, my mind stat increased. I hadn't noticed any real change, but a single point doesn't really have a noticeable effect. Logically, it should have improved my memory and my mental acuity or something like that. And as far as I remembered, every improvement brought not just uncomfortable feelings that could only be easily avoided by turning into a ghost, but they also made you tired and hungry too. If you upped your stats with a potato, that became less obvious. Well, you do have the building blocks in your stomach already. Basically, if I hadn't looked at myself, I wouldn't have noticed the change. But actually, my strength had gone up a lot of times, and I just wasn't paying attention. When I picked up the halberd, my muscles were filled with power. A palpable wave of strength washed over my whole body, wiping away my fatigue, and I felt like I could knock down even whole mountains with the halberd. But it was just a temporary effect, lasting until I put the weapon away in my inventory. My basic stats weren't even that obvious, and that was because I was getting used to my new abilities over time, and I could test them out. A gym was right in front of me, and without thinking about it, I headed in right away. I tried to pick up a couple of dumbbells and see how much weight I could lift. Having flown into the place, I discovered a small herd of zombies being led by a big guy. I wasn't surprised at all. At first, I thought it was a regular deadie who had just been pretty big when he was alive, but no. There were too many changes in his body. He was more like a gorilla with powerful hands that nearly reached the floor, and legs just the opposite, kind of shortened. And he actually supported himself on all 4 limbs. The only thing missing was fur. And also, you could see that this creature had once been a person, since the facial features, at least, were maintained. The rest of them here were just first-level weaklings. One zombie was even trapped under a barbell, still lying there, not strong enough to get out from under it. Looks like he was changed without realizing it, while doing a bench press. I didn't feel like messing with these weak and useless beasts at all. So I just activated my cleave skill right away. The deadies fell down silently, having lost their heads, but the big guy hardly even noticed. Sure, there were injuries on his skin, but they started healing up almost immediately. But that was no problem, since I just materialized behind him with my arm raised, then drove my halberd into the back of his head, like an axe into a block of wood. Thankfully, the ceiling was high enough for me to do a big swing like that. There was a cracking sound, but my first hit wasn't able to break through the thick bone to damage the tiny brain within. I had expected the gorilla to be slow, but as soon as my weapon touched his head, a powerful hand was suddenly flying in my direction. But it passed right through my body, since I managed to activate my ability at the last second. Judging by how the exercise equipment flew away when the gorilla accidentally punched it, I would not have felt any pain at all had I not managed to disappear. Just an instant death from being broken in half. The big guy stretched out his whole body and began looking around. But I decided to think carefully before attacking again. But there was no point in fixing what wasn't broken. Flying up under the ceiling, I grabbed my brass knuckles and prepared in advance. Materializing right above him, I activated my power hit immediately, filling it with all my spirit and love for wild nature. The brass knuckles shimmered and immediately plowed into the wounded head of the beast. He was thrown forward immediately, and I had no intention of waiting around for him to hit me back, disappearing into thin air before the gorilla could try to grab and squish this annoying bug. Well, screw you, Baldy. As soon as he turned around, I ended up behind him again, but this time I was holding my axe in my hands. It was easier to chop wood with it. And skulls, too, although I wasn't sure about that. The back of his skull was covered in cracks after I hit him, so I started beating on a single point while constantly changing my position. The gorilla roared and started rushing around the gym, breaking everything in his path, trying to catch his invisible enemy, but all for naught. Slowly but surely, I kept adding cracks and expanding the constantly healing wound until finally, his skull broke open for good. But the beast turned out to be smart. He hadn't started throwing himself around in search of his invisible enemy just randomly. I had never encountered a zombie like this before. It was the same with the wound. The deady, realizing that his skull was broken, simply covered it with his hand. So now, no matter how hard I hit his head, I couldn't accomplish anything. The gorilla moved, supporting himself on 3 extremities, while the 4th one was occupied with covering his head. Before, I wouldn't have attacked him head-on, like in the eyes, simply because I was worried about getting a crushing blow. But now everything had changed. I poked him in the neck with my halberd a few times, once again staying behind him, and that got me the result I needed. The monster began rushing around the gym again, smashing everything in his way. I stood in his path, jammed the handle of the halberd into the floor, and directed the sharp point directly at the mouth of the zombie rushing toward me. Oh boy, watch your nuts, squirrels got teeth. I materialized at the very last second to be able to use my spear. The massive hulking body passed through me like an armored train. The halberd held on and pierced the gorilla's head down to about 8 inches, turning his face and the contents of his skull to mush, while the remaining heap of muscles was carried across the floor by inertia. After a few seconds, everything went quiet. Only the repetitive knocking at the door reminded me how loudly I had been fighting with the big guy here. Lucky, the door was already locked, so nobody could drop in on us unannounced. The first thing I did was get my halberd back. Out of its original durability of 1,000, there was only 600 and change left. Even if I used all the repair sets that had gotten from the gray spheres, it still wouldn't be enough to fully restore it. So it would go the brass knuckles, even though they weren't as strong. They had helped me often enough, and I didn't want to lose such a convenient ace up my sleeve. The power hit was great at breaking bones, something I couldn't always do with the halberd. The sharp blade just slides off of smooth skulls. After picking up all the rewards, I finally remembered why I even came here. And even though nearly all the equipment was now closer to scrap metal, it still wasn't too hard to find a barbell, although it was bent out of shape. I would have to put everything into strength. I could lift 240 pounds from the floor. But I would die right after that, with no strength left at all. To say nothing of the fact that I couldn't take even a single step carrying that much weight. I could have kept trying, but I decided to stop while I was ahead. There was still a lot left to do, and I didn't want to wear myself out just to satisfy my curiosity. But with the halberd in my right hand, I could lift the exact same with just the right. But that made perfect sense. My strength stat was showing that it had 5 points right now, and the weapon added that same amount, which meant I was twice as strong now, and I had a feeling of power from it. I wasn't planning to do the other exercises.
I might check it later, once my stats have grown to high enough level. I couldn't yet consider myself superhuman, but that was only a matter of time. More tests and more good food from blue potatoes. All of that would make me much stronger over time. I didn't even look through the rewards from the regular deadies that I killed with the cleave attack right at the start of the fight. There were some books, skills, and spheres. When I had enough, I just looked through the spheres. And that was what was good about the gorilla. The facts were a little upsetting, though, since the reward had fallen in front of him before he fell forward. That meant I had to move a 500-pound body with my hands. I could have done it using my inventory, but emptying my inventory and then filling it back up again was not something I really wanted to do. More than that, after the slaughter that went on here, the air was stinking so bad. My things and my beer would be so rank that I would have to change out everything. The bent barbell worked perfectly, though. I put it under the reeking corpse, and using that level I could move the body a little bit, enough to find on the floor a book glowing with all the colors of the rainbow. Dance of Death, unique. Description: passive skill. A creature revived by you receives a 50% bonus to all stats for the first 30 seconds. Okay, no reason to worry. I would find a necromancer who had found some ghost class skill and we would trade. Or I would just leave it for now. But I had realized two things. Some deadies had a primitive but still existing mind. Their instincts were mostly in control over them, but still, that gorilla had been able to figure some things out. Somebody was attacking him from behind and immediately disappearing. That meant he was invisible, and could be reached if he destroyed everything around. Before that, the deadies had always just forgotten about me as soon as I faded into the air. I also learned that unique rewards could drop from unique creatures. I had never seen a big guy like that before, even if you don't count the intelligence. He was completely different from every other thing of the same body type. It seemed like he was unique, that his mutation had gone in its own direction, and if he had had the ability to increase his stats, the monster would have been able to take out anyone. Unique rewards were all well and good, but I couldn't forget about the blue ones either. I would be happy with whatever, as long as it was powerful, and ideally, rare, if it was blue. So I would keep looking for something that was exclusive to Ghost class in that way. If I came across a unique creature, I would go out of my way to kill it. But seeking them out was just too much, at least until I was able to fly at high speeds without worrying about it. After flying out of the gym, I immediately went higher up, rising above the roofs of the nearby buildings. Well, if only it were immediately. I spent about half an hour doing that. No need to waste mana. Turning all around, I saw how, not too far away, a decent-sized horde of zombies was storming a grocery store. There was only one entrance, which was pretty well sealed up, but even a few big guys were tearing through the debris, clearing the path for their smaller companions. Big guys. 3 of them together were grabbing the carts, sticks, and hefty trash that was solidly blocking the only entrance to the building. And not willy-nilly, but actually removing it, which was weird. The people there weren't just sitting around while this was happening, and were trying to hurt the big guys any way they could, hitting them on the arms and trying to get them in the eyes to slow them down a little. But that did them no good at all. But there was a shooter zombie sitting not far away, covered by the bodies of his weaker counterparts, and shooting non-stop among the people's positions. It was unsuccessful, since some system player would instantly create a semi-transparent energy shield which would deflect the beast's attacks. But still, the people had to hide again at every shot, which was very distracting. I wondered why the deadies were working together so cohesively. The people around weren't going to wise up anytime soon, so I headed to the siege point right away to figure out why the zombies were working so hard. I had a hunch that I needed to check. Too bad that if I hurried, I would be caught with my pants down.
I mean, in terms of mana, obviously. So I could only hope that those people could hold out until I got there. As I got closer, I could tell that those guys weren't average people. Each and every one of them had some abilities and potions, and a good store of weapons and ammunition. Everything was entirely of the system, meaning they had to have good levels, too. At first, I had thought there weren't any people here at all, but it turned out they had just been hiding really well. The entrance to the building was pretty narrow, and no more than 5 people could get in there at one time, so the fighters changed out periodically as soon as their mana or strength started running out. But they couldn't keep defending themselves like that forever.
Especially since, while I was getting to the store, the big guys had finally broken through the walls of debris that had been raised in front of the entrance. But that looked to be just the first barrier. The second was actually inside the building, right after the narrow entrance. The deadies couldn't make a full-on attack, but rather had to go in one by one. It was especially hard for the big guys, since they could barely squeeze through the doorframe, and once they got inside there, they couldn't work to their full potential. Especially since now the people had started attacking with even more determination. Once I thought that the Systemniks had a decent chance of winning this fight, my view of the battle changed entirely. There were windows in the building, even if they were grated. The deadies weren't troubled by the fact that they were a few feet above the ground. The regular level 1 zombies started making a staircase out of their bodies, getting down on all fours. At first they did a pretty bad job, but over time they started learning, and after about 10 minutes the first deadie grabbed onto the window grating with one hand and clumsily broke the glass with the other. After that he lost his balance and thudded to the ground. The glass was opaque, and as soon as it shattered I saw that no less than 30 people were hiding inside the store. At least that many. It could in fact be up to a whole 100. The deadies didn't stop there, and soon a shooter, having nothing else to do, climbed up the steps and started shooting his spikes, one after another. A panic started inside, and it was only after a few minutes that arrows started flying out of the window. They pierced through the dead flesh, but didn't deal any damage to the monster. I already knew how hard it was to fight those beasts. They usually hid pretty well behind the bodies of their companions, and getting to the pricks was fairly hard. To do it, you really needed to know how to use a bow well. Well, practice makes perfect. I made it to the next building over and materialized in a room on the second floor. I carefully opened the window, got out my bow, and put some arrows on the windowsill. The first one went wide, hitting some poor, bitten-up bastard. I was sure they hadn't noticed me, so I let the next one fly, this time taking into account how I had missed. That's better, I nodded to myself. I may not have killed the shooter, but I did manage to hit him in the neck. After every shot, I disappeared, just in case, and appeared again only to draw my bowstring and let an arrow fly. And that saved my life, since after the second shot, the deadies decided to fight back. A massive chunk of asphalt flew right through the window where I was standing, just ripped out, I had to assume. Taking a good look, I saw that it had been thrown by a big guy. He reached out immediately for another piece, and his powerful fingers easily ripped a piece of the curb out of the ground. But the big guy wasn't going to throw anything else. Instead, the deadies froze, as if they were waiting for something. The staircase made of bodies fell apart again, and only right by the store entrance did the pitched battle continue. It looked entirely like everyone was just waiting for me. So I appeared again for literally half a second, in which time I managed to get off another shot. The curb stone whistled into the room, bounced off the floor, and flew into the wall opposite the window, breaking through a wardrobe as it went. That was where it stayed. The shooter also completely forgot about the people hiding inside the store, and shot at me, destroying the chandelier which had been hanging behind me with one of his thorns. I moved to another room, one floor higher up, but I had just started opening the window when the deadies continued their attack. Only this time it wasn't just one big guy throwing stones, but all 3 of them. I changed my position a few times, but the deadies were on alert, And even though their attack on the people hadn't stopped, a significant portion of their forces was focused on me. "This is some bullshit," I said, mentally shaking my head, when I realized they had an ambush prepared for me. There were fast zombies hidden in every exit from the building. They were hiding behind doors, in bushes, and one of them had even climbed into a dumpster. I only noticed it because I got tired of shooting and headed into the thick of the monsters to figure out what was wrong with them. If I were a regular, normal human being, I would eventually have tried to leave the building, and then they would have ambushed me when I least expected it. The deadies had thought of it as though they were being led by a person. Had some kind of necromancer possibly shown up in our city? Then I could make a good trade with this skill book. As for me, I went about scouting around with that idea in mind. The total number of deadies was about 100, but what was noticeable was that at least 20 of them were mutated. 5 big guys, 1 shooter, and the rest were all skinny and weak, but very fast. I had not yet decided on a name for them, either leapers or runners, since they didn't have a problem with either. I found it. I couldn't help but notice something strange. In the middle of the groaning zombies, I found one who was behaving completely differently. He was looking all around, like he was alive, trying to pick out the danger. I could read the emotions on his face, fear in particular. "He's afraid of me?" I thought to myself. Good on him. I would be scared too. Good on him. I would be scared too. The zombie looked intelligent. The way he looked around was deliberate. While the other deady's pupils were clouded over, this one was damned similar to a person.
But this was definitely not a person. I checked it myself, putting my hand on his forehead. Room temperature. He was dead. Plus, there were words shining over his head that backed up my hunch. Zombie Leader, Level 2. Everything suddenly became clear. A new mutant had appeared among the deadies, much more dangerous than the others. He was intelligent and had the ability to direct his underlings. It was he who had made the big guys throw stones and the normal zombies form into a staircase. There was no doubt about it. There were no coincidences here. Opening my inventory, I looked around for one specific item. Smiling internally, I began to rise in the air. 5 feet, 10, 20, that should be enough. Well, time to start. Chapter 14. The grenade fell down, and all I had left to do was watch the results. There was no other way I could have gotten to the smart monster, since there were normal deadies swarming all around him, and there were leapers scattered around them, hiding in the moaning crowd, ready to sink their claws into the skin of their opponents at any time. Plus, the density of the crowd was extreme, and I simply wouldn't have been able to materialize near him. I thought about throwing my curta, since it was heavy and sharp enough, but I didn't really feel like losing such a valuable toy. Sooner or later, I would be able to trade it for something really cool. And so, throwing the grenade, well, it's my pleasure. The bomb exploded immediately, just barely touching one of the deadies' heads. I aimed as well as I could, but the zombies, slow as they were constantly threw me off my aim, those assholes. The explosion knocked off some heads, throwing dozens of them into the air, along with hundreds of pieces of shrapnel. They pierced flesh, breaking the skulls of the beasts, but flew right through me. Oof, hot. I couldn't say that the feeling was nice, but it was pretty sobering. It was a reminder that I still wasn't invincible. The smarty survived. Well, I hadn't expected it to be easy. The explosion had knocked him to the side and pierced him with a good number of shrapnel shards, so now a gap had formed in the exact center of the crowd of deadies. But it would close up in a few seconds, so there was no time to waste. Having rushed downward, I materialized right before landing with my weapon right in front of me, aimed at the smarty. The edge pierced the monster's chest with a crunching sound. But I didn't stop there. I ripped the halberd out of the Dedi's chest, pulled back, and swung the blade down as hard as I could. But a zombie bodyguard showed up just as I was doing so. He jumped forward, sacrificing himself for the sake of the leader. My weapon, which had cleaved his head in half, was stuck inside the dead flesh. Shouting angrily, I disappear into thin air, which I did right on time. Cold fingers tried to grab me by the cloak, but all in vain, since I was already floating above them, watching the smarty. His wounds weren't even starting to heal up, but that didn't stop him from getting up. His lungs were sticking out of his broken ribs, all of his clothes were ripped up, and the fear was even more obvious on his face. All the zombies turned around at once and started wandering through the street. Now the big guys convened around the smarty, covering him from all sides, and the shooter was also constantly sniffing around, searching for the threat. The Deddies had completely forgotten about the store, and the people who had been defending it for the last hour and preparing themselves for death watched the procession in surprise. He was pussing out. He had decided that someone from the store had attacked him, but being careful wouldn't save him. Yeah, I had hoped to take care of it with minimal waste, but that clearly wasn't in the cards. Cleave attack! I flew around the monster, shooting shot after shot, activating the innate ability of my weapon. It had enough mana for 4 uses, but even that wasn't enough. The first 2 hits landed right on target, but they weren't enough to break the bastard's neck since the big guys kept getting in the way. And then they just covered him with a mountain of impenetrable flesh. Not worrying about the waste of durability and estimating that each hit was also using it up, I started using it all, chopping all the Deddies around into pieces. It hit the shooter, too. He got messed up by one of the first ones since I hit him on purpose, chopping right down him. Just to make sure, these were tricky beasts, and you couldn't really avoid their thorns. Plus, they shoot them almost completely silently. Taking care of the leapers wasn't that hard either, and in the end, they spread out so much that I cut down a whole crowd. All I had left to do was figure out what to do with the 5 big guys who were covering their leader with their bodies. After carefully looking all around and making sure there was no danger nearby, I materialized and jammed my halberd in the behind of the uppermost big guy. But he didn't react at all, just groaning quietly. It was a stalemate. Although they couldn't attack me, or I would be able to get to their dear leader, I couldn't do anything either. I could be chopping at that pile of regenerating flesh until morning. Then again, I didn't have to get through all of them. I could just kill the top ones, then throw them to the side and repeat with the ones underneath. That's what I started doing. But as soon as I knocked the head off the uppermost big guy and his green sphere dropped to the ground, they realized that something was up. "What do you want, you son of a bitch?" came a muffled croak from the mountain of flesh. It can speak? Well, I guess that was to be expected. "That's a stupid question, dude. I thought you were smarter than—" I shook my head. "You already know what I want." "You think you're gonna get a reward from me? You thought wrong, dumbass. From those like me, the best you can get is 10 pounds of inventory." Was I wrong? Or was he lying? "What are you offering in return for your life? I need something valuable," I yelled into the pile of flesh. "What do you want, prick?" The smarty was grasping at straws. You could hear a hint of hope in his voice. "I could turn you into someone like me, and you will live forever." "Tell me about the system. What is for? Why does it exist? And what is it in general? What can we expect? And what are the conditions for it to end?" "No, anything else," he answered after a few seconds. "If you want, you can take my highest servants. They could really be helpful for an aberration like yourself. You can attract valuable rewards with them," he said, trying to bribe me again. "But if I can get rewards from them, why would I turn down 10 pounds of inventory?" I said, surprised. "I'm not leaving here until I get what I came for." "To hell with what you get, you dickhead," he responded sharply. "I'll just lie here, and there's nothing you can do to me. Even if you kill my servants, you can't move them out the way.
So bugger off while you still can. Go and hide and sit there in silence until I find you. I went over to the side and dumped everything out of my inventory. After that, barely even touching the body, I took it about a yard away, then swung my sword and broke the next one's neck, doing the same transportation trick with him. Okay, I give. You win. Now the voice wasn't so muffled anymore, since the number of bodies had gone down a little. If you're going to talk, talk. While you do, I will keep going, because time is money, I said calmly, and continued chopping the next one. But that one was covering himself with his powerful paws, so the process was going much slower than I had hoped. I can take the higher ones out of the city. You want that, right? Higher ones was what he called zombies, apparently. Well, fine, it was his right. Thwack! Not interested. I didn't even consider stopping, just kept on chopping at the dead flesh. I'll give you a hint. I am interested in unique rewards. The unique ones don't obey me. What else do you want? I could hear traces of panic in his voice. Okay, whatever, forget it. I had finished the last big guy, and moved him so that he was just holding down the Smarty's legs. Stop! Eftar Esther Sticker! Lower beast! My brothers will exterminate you all! You pitiful meat! Food! Cattle! Defective, disgusting beast! Thwack! I had gotten tired of listening to the freak's desperate cries, and swing my weapon sliced him right on the neck. His head rolled onto the asphalt, stopping a few yards away, with his forehead against the curb. I set about checking the space around the body. Before that, of course, I had to dematerialize, because zombies kept showing up on the street periodically, and I had no desire to deal with them. And there was no reason to waste so much durability. It would be an insult to a weapon this powerful. At least, not until I found something more convenient. After flying around the Smarty's body a few times, putting it into my inventory, and moving it a bit away, I was sure that no reward had fallen. None. I got only what had come from the 5 big guys. 2 green potatoes, the same number of spheres, and 1 blue food set. I do love those. There's always something delicious in them. Could the Smarty really have been telling the truth? But still, he had talked about my inventory, and it hadn't changed at all. Maybe he just wasn't dead. I suddenly had the thought, and flew over toward the head, looking at it carefully. Theoretically, if he was alive, a little window should pop up with information about his level, health, and type. But Smarty Head Upgrade, Level 1. Description: upgradable artifact. As it levels up, its abilities increase. Has intelligence and limited free will, but cannot hurt its owner. It is also forced to obey all of your commands. Other characteristics are individual. You are advised to check this information with the artifact itself. Use: upon destruction of the artifact, a reward may drop. The value of the reward depends on the level of the artifact. I reread the description a few times, and finally realized that I didn't understand anything, except that it couldn't harm its owner, which was very good. An upgradable artifact was interesting, because over time it could become a powerful item. But at the same time it was uninteresting, because right now it was a useless piece of shit. And something was telling me that it could still talk. I wasn't intending to appear right in the crowd of deadies who were crawling in a hurry toward the sound of the swearing, so I put the head in my inventory and flew on. On the way, I grabbed my things and picked up the gray spheres, potatoes, and books from the normal zombies. To figure out this artifact quicker, I headed straight for a comfortable place. Plus, at the same time, I could open up my rewards and see what I had been gifted with this time. This time, I picked a cozy room on the 5th floor of a modest concrete apartment building. Moving onto a chair in the small, sparsely furnished kitchen, typical of that type, I took the head out of my inventory and put it in front of me. For the first few seconds, nothing happened. But as soon as I flicked the head, it came right to life.
Ah! Shit! You fucking rubbish!"
screamed the head. His eyes were wide open and darted all over the place. It was clear that he was trying to turn around, but there was no way.
"I know. What? You..."
"Oh, no way," I said, shaking my head and putting the artifact back in my inventory. "I will deal with that later." He was yelling really loud, and with such anger that I wasn't really feeling it. I would have to calm him down and talk to him normally later. I wasn't planning on killing him, since over time he would definitely start to be useful. For example, when I reach the limit of my skills, maybe I could throw a couple on him. I hope so, at least. The system didn't give me a clear description of the artifact, so I could only hope. But this screaming head didn't want to just tell me. Maybe I could pour some vodka in its mouth? That would definitely loosen his tongue. I dropped a whole pile of rewards on the table and got started on opening them right away. The first thing was to deal with the potatoes. Out of 20 food sets, I managed to get 2 potions for health and mana and put them in my inventory right away. Now it was the spheres' turn. I had 43 gray ones and 2 green ones, which was a fair amount, but I just needed them for the sake of one single item. Knife, knife, sword, bow, arrows. Oh, that would come in handy. Keep going. In the end, I got basically nothing. Most of the trash I just tossed to the side so it wouldn't bug me under my feet. Just all sorts of helmets, hammers, clubs, and other nonsense. I even got some kind of medieval cuirass, but that item was definitely not for me. But there was still a bunch of worthwhile junk on the table, and a couple of trinkets. I got 3 of those repair sets, which could be called a win. I had 5 of them in total, and I immediately used them to repair my halberd, which put its durability up to 800 and a bit more. To use the set, I just had to put it in one hand and the weapon in the other. Then the system itself offered to begin the repairs. The whetstone just dissolved into dust, and that was all. The halberd became more durable. Simple pants, normal. Description: worn out, somewhat dirty and ripped pants. Don't forget to wear a belt, or they will fall down. The system wasn't lying. Most things automatically fit themselves to the size of their owner, but not these pants. They were made to be as uncomfortable as possible, and moreover, as soon as you put them on, they would, almost as if deliberately, start falling off. But I had a thief's belt for that. Speaking of which, thief's hood, normal. Perception +2. Set: thief's clothing, 2 out of 7. Description: additional skill with full set, imperceptibility. The hood automatically attaches to any clothing. I know. The cuirass also was part of some set, as well as a short sword that I got from one of the gray rewards. In short, that was exactly why I was carrying that trash around. I thought if I could get a whole set, then the value would go up a lot. Maybe I could trade them for something worthwhile. But who was I kidding? Right now, people were doing their best just to survive, and they were nowhere near the point of collectible rewards. But I could afford it. I tried on my new clothes. They fit like a glove. I don't know what it was about the hood, but I looked way cooler now than in the hat, and my bare legs weren't sticking out under the cloak thanks to the pants. As soon as I changed my headgear, my eyesight got better, along with my other senses. My heading also got sharper, as though I had taken out earplugs, and my sense of smell started picking up new scents. And that was just 2 points. When you got them from items, the feeling was so much stronger. There was nothing else of value to be found in the gray rewards. My set of rings was already so full, so I moved on to the green ones. They had been left lying all alone on the dirty tablecloth full of holes, and I had almost forgotten about them. Fire arrows, uncommon, 1/1. Description: 20 arrows, includes a quiver, single use. Upon a hit, lights on fire, burning the target. Really, it would have been clear even without a description. Too bad you couldn't use them again afterward. but shooting them at those shooters might be fairly effective if they burned with a good flame. Paralyzing dagger, uncommon. 300/300. Description: upon hitting a living creature, it injects paralyzing poison into its blood. Refills in 24 hours. Paralyzes for up to 30 minutes. Up to 30? A terrible marker, really. Without the word "from," you were just left to guess. Maybe if I cut a cockroach, it would be paralyzed for exactly half an hour. But if I hit an adult male, it would work for only a few seconds. But I didn't think there would be such useless trash in a green reward. That would be more like a gray one. I thought the time frame must be given for a person.
Did I need this knife? Not really. I wasn't planning on hunting people for now. I was more interested in zombies, the strongest zombies, to be precise. But I could also use it against animals, so I would keep it for now. If nothing else, I could even throw it, just had to learn how. Having finished with my valuables, I decided to once again try my luck with learning about my new artifact. Even though it was stupid to call a decapitated head an artifact, but isn't that just what the system would do?
Let them out! You got me, prick! The artifact was still screaming, but quieted down after a few seconds and started darting its eyes around the room again. What the hell? You put me in your inventory, freak? He stared at me with a look of utter incomprehension. Yeah, I shrugged. If you don't stop screaming, I'm putting you back there. You're telling me what to do? You bicker piece of shit! His eyes widened in hatred once more, and he continued pouring out a stream of vitriol. I just sat there for about 5 minutes, thinking to myself, not paying any attention to his yelling. I was thinking about where I should go next, where to find strong opponents. I was also thinking about how my level hadn't increased in a suspiciously long time. I was even tired of raising my stats. The feeling when you get a little bit stronger always warms your heart. But now, having taken down so many all-powerful monsters, my level was still 10 and wasn't going anywhere. Opening up my rewards had wasted an unacceptably large amount of time, so I had even managed to start getting hungry. I grabbed the screaming head by the hair, dragged it into the bedroom, and pushed its face into a pillow. I put another one on top, then wrapped the whole thing in a blanket. I could have easily just ordered him to be quiet, but I thought that the artifact needed a good scream. I mean, just a bit ago he had been the master of the deadies, and now he was basically just a child's rattle. And just level 1, too. The screams became more high-pitched, but they didn't pierce my ears so bad anymore, so I threw the dirty tablecloth off the table, covered it with a mountain of system items, and activated a blue potato. The only thing missing was music. A new, sparkling clean tablecloth appeared on the table, and on top of it, hey, sushi rolls are good too. I nodded to myself and threw away the chopsticks, snatching up the food with my hands. As far as I was aware, even the Japanese only used chopsticks when they wanted to be civilized, at least when they were eating sushi. It wouldn't be too comfortable to scoop up soup with your hands, as you might expect. So I decided to conform to the culture and not make things up. Especially since I could only eat with chopsticks if I stabbed the little balls of rice and fish onto them. As long as I don't get system tapeworms. In addition to the main dish, of which you could eat your fill, there was also a little teapot with green tea and a somewhat uncomfortable little bowl. Theoretically, I could have poured it in there, drop by drop, and enjoyed drinking the tea. But I took the easy way out, getting a 16-ounce mug from the cupboard in the kitchen. I tossed some sugar in it and poured out the whole teapot. Now that's how you do it. Even if in high society I would deserve to commit ritual seppuku for that, or at least would be called trashy. But it was so convenient, delicious, and nice for me. So let the rest of the world hang. This time I was much luckier. Instead of a useless intelligence point, I got a point in conduits, which meant whenever I got an attacking skill, it would be just a little stronger. And that was just awesome. Look at what truly spiritual food could do.
And if the system were to grant me vegan diarrhea, then my soul would increase just at least 3 times. Finishing my dinner, I grabbed the plates off the tablecloth and threw them in the far corner of the room. The rewards were unpacked, everything I needed was in my inventory, and my potions were ready to be used. My weapon was also repaired and ready for battle. I could head off to hunt now, but there was still one piece of unfinished business. "Asshole!" shouted the head as soon as I took it out of its packaging. "Have you finished yelling?" I asked calmly. "If not, I will put you in my inventory. Then I will take you to the birds, who will peck you until you shut up." You wouldn't dare. You are lesser, a mortal. I am a higher being." He began shouting, almost choking in his outrage. "You're an artifact, nothing more, nothing less, and you will serve me." I shrugged. "And you can't refuse my commands, so I command you, once again, to shut up." I watched him for a little while, but he really didn't utter a single word, just frowned and blinked, unable to open his mouth. "Excellent. Now tell me what you can." Chapter 15. "Well, for now, I can't tell you anything," answered the head after a second's pause. "Why?" I was surprised. "The system talked about you like you were something useful, but I don't need just a free conversation partner. It is in your interests to be useful, because otherwise I will level you up a little and then throw you down from somewhere high up to get a reward from you." "When you level me up, then I can show you something," mumbled the artifact in dissatisfaction. "Anyway, if I could, I would—" "Shut up," I commanded, and the head immediately fell silent. "How will you be useful if I level you up?" I can teach you skills, for example, but not the ones you find in rewards. For us, it is a little different. Like, if you let me bite up a systemnik, it will probably drop something. Also, something might drop for killing a well-developed higher one. Or that there's no more than 2 skills for every 10 levels, and all that. He was thinking out loud. Or I could warn you about danger. "And what do you need to level up?" I pepped right up. A skill would not go amiss, and I needed to know how my dematerialization would work on him. "To eat. Just eating the living, that's all," he said with an evil grin, thinking it would be hard for me to deal with that. I mean, feeding your compatriots to a dead beast was not a very humanitarian activity. "It's no issue. I can make it work," I said, waving my hand and standing up. "Now hang on." "What? You? Crappy piece of sh—" Once again, I did not let him finish. We were having a nice conversation, and he decided to start cursing at me again. I could probably just forbid him from swearing ever, but it was so funny when he did it that I definitely wasn't going to. But he had started swearing because my experiment hadn't worked. I grabbed the artifact by the hair, lifted him up, and dematerialized. The head fell onto the floor and rolled a little, and as soon as the curses started flowing from his mouth, I put him in my inventory. Too bad, but the artifact would have to stay there a while. It was a shame, for sure, that he didn't dematerialize with me like the rest of the system weapons. Otherwise, it would be the most powerful possible weapon of all. Not worry about it at all. Just shoot fireballs out of it until his mana ran out. Then just pour a couple potions in his mouth and keep going. So, if he got an attacking skill, I could use him like a turret. I would set him up on a pike, and he would take out anybody I told him to. Plus, I could use him as a watchdog. Dead throats didn't have to worry about straining their vocal cords, and he screamed like an old-timey paper salesman. So no, I wasn't going to break open the head for now. Let it live and grow, and I would find food for it somehow. My inventory had reached an acceptable size, and there was no reason for me to kill those like me. I mean, just for the sake of 10 pounds. Having taken care of all those vital tasks, I headed right out to the street.
Everything looked just as boring as before there. The zombies were wandering among the broken-down cars, every once in a great while perking up and stampeding towards the living quarters. I had no idea how they were being led, but sometimes the deadies would all find survivors and start breaking down the doors. In the narrow entrances, the zombies most got in each other's ways, so basically people just waited them out until, after some time, the dead would get tired and separate on their own ways again. Without a sentient leader, these monsters weren't really that dangerous. I had pants, so I could breathe easy about that. I also had other items, but I was still totally naked in respect to abilities. I could learn up to 4 of them, 2 active, 2 passive, but I hadn't done it yet.
Maybe I could find something among the people living in the store. They didn't seem weak, and by now they must have reduced the population of zombies significantly, meaning all sorts of rewards definitely must have dropped from them. I was sure that a lot of people had learned some gray bullshit that dropped right away, so now those guys had to be holding on to skill books in their inventories, keeping them for a better time, like when they got to level 10 and could use them to their full potential. I was wrong about how many people were living in the store, but at that time, I hadn't been able to get inside, and all my available information about them came thanks to a broken window alone. I had seen just 5 fighters at the exit, so basing the number on them would have been stupid. I counted 90 people in total. For this small supermarket, stuffed to the gills with food products, it was quite a lot. The people were packed in like sardines in a can, but it looked completely tolerable. That was because there was a serious-looking old dude among them who was giving orders and discipline to all and sundry, tirelessly pushing his subordinates tooth and nail. What really surprised me was that there were a comparatively large number of people inside with a red number 10 over their heads. But I didn't find anyone with a higher level than that. Yeah, most of the people were level 1, and most likely there were quite a few who hadn't killed even a single zombie. About 15 people were between 3rd and 7th level. The majority of the fighters were between level 8 and 10. A round number let you pick a class, and that was when a person got much stronger. Those who had started out with some kind of elemental ability chose corresponding classes, which powered up the arsenal they already had. Some of them had just allowed themselves to pick their future specialty at random. I wondered when they would start going in a more peaceful direction. At least someone among the leveled-up fighters probably picked a craft as how they would develop further. They had enough food for a long time, as well as alcohol, and they were strict about it here. The refrigerators were still working, so the people could still indulge in meat. That was what they were eating first, since the cereals and canned foods could still be used when the electricity finally went out, along with the internet. Maybe it would have been worthwhile for me to have looked at a phone more often to find out what was happening in the world, and digging through forums wouldn't have been a bad idea either. But for that, I would first need to get myself a phone. So, screw it, whatever was going on in the world. If a computer showed up in one of the rooms, I would look. And with this blue potato, I should fly in right. I was wondering why the hell he was doing this. I flew outside to see how their defenses were set up. There were 2 sentries on the front lines. There was a whole mountain of debris there at the entrance. The wall was in the form of a semicircle, and it reached a height of about 5 or 6 feet. The sentries didn't draw attention to themselves and sat hidden behind the wall, but even so, sometimes the deadies passing by would notice the living and try to break through the wall. When that happened, one of them would head outside and quickly take care of them, hitting them literally just a couple times. When there was a decent collection of bodies, they would call for help, and a full 5 of them would drag the bodies away. Otherwise, the deadies would have long ago been able to easily get into the store by using the pile of corpses. "Hey, share that," whispered one to the other when he noticed he was eating a reward. I almost materialized right in front of them in shock. "Get your own. My guts are already filling up," he answered, turning around and continuing to swallow the gray potato. "I just got my strength up. If I didn't eat, I would die,
and sleep a little too. It seemed like you didn't have to open up the rewards. You could just throw the potato in your mouth, and all the nutritional substances would go straight into your body. Convenient. But I felt like it wouldn't taste too good. After watching the sentries, I head back inside the building. I still had to introduce myself. We were neighbors, after all. The leader wasn't just pushing his people willy-nilly. The previous attack had shown them starkly how defenseless they were against a real enemy. So now those people were engaged in two tasks. The first one was building new barricades, inside the building this time. Secondly, they were making a passage to the upper floor. That way they could move a lot of people there and get to the living areas without going outside. The store itself was located on the first floor of a tall building, but it had a separate exit to the outside. The guys who were supposed to break through the concrete spent most of their time doing nothing. That was because it was better not to make any noise when groups of zombies were passing by the building. The brigade that was on the upper floor were also awaiting orders. And once the deadies passed on, the people went back to knocking through the ceiling with hammers as hard as they could, since soon the sound would draw in a new set of monsters. Having seen the way of life of this other camp, practically the same as the other one, I decided that I may as well try to establish contact. But to just appear in front of the leader? That was risky. I could just get lost in the crowd and nobody would notice me. But then I would have to get his attention somehow. He was a busy man, and also strict, cracking the whip. Which meant I needed to appear just right. "Get outside and get hitting," shouted Yegor, as soon as he was told that a crowd of deadies was passing by outside. The room was filled with the sounds of hammers hitting, with the noise reaching upstairs too, and in a couple of minutes it came over the radio that the deadies had heard the sound of their hectic labor again. "Stop!" He waved his hands, and the people transmitted his order along a chain, since hearing him over the noise was practically impossible. "Don't be scared. You know how amazing this path is going to be? You'll be able to climb up there and play," he said, winking at a boy about 7 years old who was hiding behind the shelves and covering his ears with his hands. He smiled right away and nodded in response. "Excellent!" He patted the boy on the back and headed off to look over the defensive structures. "Yegor, sir!" A man who had just been working on an interior wall turned to him. "There's nothing to add here. It's just made of trash and sticks." He pointed to the newly built wall, and well, to be frank, its security was nothing to write home about. "What kind of bullshit is this? Couldn't you build it right?" Yegor said, frowning. He always looked gloomy, and he was called Pancake behind his back. He was short, bald, and always frowning, and he just looked like a pancake. It was easier to jump over him than go around. But he wasn't fat, rather stout and thick-set. "Well, what should I use to work? I have nothing to weld with, no bricks, no mortar. Where could I even get cords from, 'cause I don't have them either?" The builder started making excuses. "Get it done!" shouted the pancake in return, and having turned around, said over his shoulder, "The wall will be ready in an hour, and it should look good at first sight." The builder muttered something under his breath in annoyance, but Yegor clearly didn't give a crap about it. Although a few days ago he had been a normal taxi driver, his past didn't let him just take it lying down, letting things happen however they would. He knew from personal experience that people would relax as soon as you gave them a little bit of freedom. At least, that's how it had been in the army. But now it wasn't peacetime either, so... Beep! Nobody paid any attention to the noise and kept doing what they were doing, but it seemed very significant to the man, but somehow extremely out of place. Beep! What the hell is that? Yegor walked through the shelves, trying to find where the sound was coming from. The irritating beeping hadn't stopped and was getting faster minute by minute. Beep! What the hell are you doing there? growled the man, noticing that some kid had set up behind the counter, and that was exactly where the beeping was coming from.
I'm ringing up items, he said, shrugging. I just didn't know how to weigh them.
As though nothing were wrong, he placed a rustling, waving bag on the scales, and, with all seriousness, checked out the button panel displayed on the screen. Where to press, he mumbled. But soon he found some button, and the beep sound came again. Do you want something? Who are you, asshole? Shouted Yegor again. And why aren't you working? You think I'm not working? The boy said, staring at him like he was an idiot. What's it to you? He glanced back at his work space. Anyway, I rang up this stuff at a discount for you. With those words, the boy picked up the bag, and, accompanied by the shocked cries of the onlookers, pulled its contents out and put them right on the counter. Bastards! All of you! You will all be eaten. Yeah, you, fatty, all of you! Screamed the head, totally out of control. I let the artifact go a bit, and once a whole crowd of armed people gathered around me, I put it back in my inventory, out of harm's way. If someone was going to kill this talkative head, it would be me. Take that shit back out and stand with your face against the wall, the thick-set man said through his teeth, adding a note of iron will to his voice. And he was the leader in this oh-so-nice camp. I'm not putting this shit anywhere I don't want to. It's my artifact, and I'll do what I want with it, I said calmly. I came here to talk. I need at least some rare skills. Why the hell should we give you anything? The man cut me off. And I ask you again, who are you? Casp. Just Casp, I shrugged. I'm not just asking for them. 2 books in exchange for protection from a whole horde led by a sentient zombie. We don't need protection. As you can see, we can take care of ourselves pretty well. And where did you even see the horde? There was no one at the entrance. You fat fuck. The head appeared in my hand again, and being spewing vitriol almost on autopilot at the man. Mostly because I had directed his eyes right at him. I command you to be quiet. I gave the order, and the artifact's mouth immediately closed. There you go. I put the decapitated head in front of me. The sentient zombie. And I, as you say, took care of him. And if I hadn't gotten involved, we wouldn't be speaking now. He put down the hammer he had readied for battle, and all the other fighters followed his lead. It seems like you're telling the truth. Dude, I got past your sentries and spent about 10 minutes ringing up items here at the counter. If I had wanted to hurt you, you would no longer exist. So, do you have any books? No. He shrugged. Thanks for your help, of course, and we have an unpaid debt to you, but we haven't gotten anything better than green. You must know that they are fairly rare. They're not called rare for nothing. Son of a... I shook my head. Maybe you have rainbow ones? The unique ones. We have a couple items, but they are just trash. He extracted a weird, small gray bag and a completely ordinary ring from his inventory. This is for some sort of portalists, it seems, called spatial dust. He showed me the bag. And this ring, when activated, causes intolerable pain. Why you would need that, I can't imagine. Right. I felt once again justified in my belief that it would be a major issue to find something worthwhile among the unique items. I didn't need any of that trash. Unless I wasn't understanding something about the dust, but even that could hardly help me. Plus, the guy wasn't planning to give it to me just like that. Just saving his camp one time from certain death clearly wasn't enough. You had better tell me how you got to us. All of the entrances are blocked up and are under surveillance. Were those idiots sleeping on the job? Or did you distract them somehow? The man's hoarse voice dragged me out of my daydreams. My class is like that. Don't worry about it. I show up wherever I go. I waved my hand. And it was then that I realized that they hardly seemed to have seen unique creatures. That meant they got rewards like that from tests. Perhaps you would know how to get more tests to happen? Go online and read about it, he said harshly, having lost interest in me when he realized I wasn't there to barter, but just came for freebies. And it's better not to scare people. Next time, if you plan to drop in, you should at least warn us. Well then. But I appreciated that he was all business.